Hi, I'm Ken Weaver. I grew up in Strathmere in the late 1940s. My dad was in the service around the country during the Second World War, and when the war ended we were out in California, and he did not have enough points to get discharged immediately, so he was sent overseas. He participated in some of the A-bomb testing in Bikini Atoll, etc., in Weetok, I think. And my sister and I and my mother came back from Salt Lake City, where he was stationed just before he went overseas, by train. She wanted to drive because they hadn't made any cars for 5 years and wanted to keep the car, but he didn't want her driving over the Rockies. So we took the train from Salt Lake City to Chicago, Chicago to Philly, Philadelphia down to Palermo, and I remember getting off in Palermo right around Christmas time of 1945, and came over to the big house where my grandparents lived at Sherman and Commonwealth, that is now the motel, Strathmere Motel. We lived across the street. We then, the next year, in '46, moved into the house my parents had bought across Sherman Road. And I grew up from first grade to sixth grade living in Strathmere. The summers were great, the winters not so much. It wasn't a weather thing, it was that it was kind of lonely. After school, all the kids in Ocean City would go out and play, and we would get on the bus and come back to Strathmere, where there were hardly any kids to play. My mother grew up here, and there seemed to be more kids then. She went to the one-room schoolhouse on Vincent that's still there. And when they graduated from 8th grade, they took the train every day, pardon me, over to Ocean City High School. By the time the train stopped running in the 30s, that we took buses. The high school kids from Sea Isle and Strathmere went to Ocean City High School. And since the bus was coming through anyway, the grade school kids in Strathmere went to Ocean City grade school or schools. I went to the Central Avenue School, which is now the jail. My grandchildren get a kick out of the fact that I went to school at what is now the Ocean City Jail. And the Wesley Avenue School was opened soon after for the lower grade kids, but I went to Central Avenue. Since there wasn't much to do, there weren't many kids to play with. I was lucky in that there was a family by the name of Brown. Mr. Brown's name was Merritt Othello Brown. People in town called him Brownie. I called him Mr. Brown. His son's name was Merritt Othello Brown Jr., or Brownie Boy. They both liked sports. He was 4 years ahead of me, and I guess in second grade Mr. Brown asked me if I would go along to Ocean City High School football games with them. So we went to all the games, home and away. We went to Cape May and Wildwood and Middle and Vineland and Hamilton, all over the place to see Ocean City play. And in those days, Ocean City had it was a single wing, as I remember. Ocean City had a no huddle offense. And so Brownie Boy and I made up a football team of 2 people, and since he was the senior member, he got to be the backfield and I had to be the line. And since they had a no huddle offense at Ocean City, we had to do that, and I had to memorize about 25 plays where he would call from the backfield, and I had to know whether to go down and left or right or block or whatever.
And you're 6 years old or 8 years old?
Well, we started when I was 7, I guess, and played for several years.
Wow.
And yeah, so I got to really like football. We also played basketball on a rack that we built out of wooden storm doors, and we played baseball up in a circle sort of between Seacliff and Bayview. That's now pretty much all built up, but we played, that was all open then. We had trouble finding players. In September you could get other people to play, but as it got harder, one time we tried to play a football game in Sea Isle that Brownie had arranged with some of the guys he went to school with, and we got caught hitchhiking out on Commonwealth. So I think I was in 3rd grade, and the problem was everybody knew us, and they knew we weren't supposed to be out there, so we never made it to that away game. There was a lot of things you could do if nobody was in town. I played Cowboys and Indians on the roofs of most of the houses on Sherman Road. One time my cousin, we had a house in addition to the big house, it's now the motel, and our house across the street. My parents had bought a house down the street, about 4 houses down Sherman on the left, and it was to be a rental property investment, and they had drywalls on all the rooms but no ceilings. And so my cousin Rich and I both had air guns, or BB guns, and we used wooden matches in the BB guns, and he would get in one bedroom, I would get in the other, and we would fire the BB gun, the matches, up into the rafters and try to get them to light and fall into the other bedroom, which usually worked. And we were old enough to know how to put out the matches, so no harm came.
Didn't you build your own playing field too at one point?
Yeah, down toward Gerard's there, down south of our house on Commonwealth, we cleared a couple of lots so that we could have a place to play football. And it's the only time I ever got poison ivy. We actually cleared the poison ivy, and I got it the roots, the sap on me, and that gave me poison ivy. But we persevered and got it. We built yard markers, and we had a big box with a hole in it for a ticket office, but nobody ever bought tickets. We had goalposts, and we played several games there. And then the big kids, when it flooded later, like in December, it flooded and froze, and the big kids played ice hockey on our field and smashed into our goalposts, and that was the end of the goalpost. They were using that for an ice hockey rink. Let's see. I'm drawing a blank.
Well, your mother died at a young age.
Yeah, I was in 3rd grade in 1948. My mother died, and we moved across the street into my grandmother's house. My Aunt Jean had come down from Collingswood to take care of my grandmother, so we moved in with them. So I was really raised with her 2 children, my own sister Kate, and then Rich and Sue Johnson. And I always get a little confused whether to call them cousins or sister and brother, because they were really raised like my sister and brother. I also wanted to talk about my paper routes.
Oh, right.
I was an industrious young lad, and I started a paper route in Strathmere, I would say in 3rd grade maybe. I had a wagon. My bike was a pre-World War II bike, and it worked fine except it didn't stop. It was a coaster brake with no brakes, so I used to ride up to Harlan and Gogg's place where the post office was, and I had to dismount and run alongside and bring it to a stop just before it crashed into the steps. So I couldn't very well deliver papers on that, so I towed a wagon around town, and I charged $25 a week to deliver the Enquirer and the Bulletin. And by the time I got to, I guess, 4th grade, Rich and I got bikes for Christmas, and they were real nice, big red English bikes, handle brakes. And about that time, the Bulletin man came through and asked Harlan Woodcamp if he knew of anybody that would start a paper route in Whale Beach, which may seem crazy to people now, but there were a lot of people in Whale Beach in the summer. So Harlan recommended that the guy talk to me. He thought Kenny Weaver's already delivering papers in Strathmere, maybe he'll do Whale Beach. So we got a big, huge basket for my bike, and I started a 50-paper route. None in Strathmere, all in Whale Beach. And there were no houses, almost no houses on the bay side of Commonwealth. They were all on the ocean side, and the streets went down. There were 2 or 3 houses on each side of the street in Whale Beach. And so I got to where I was delivering 45 or 48 papers. It wasn't easy because A, there were no house numbers, B, people rented for a week or two, and then you had to resell the route every other week or every week. And I would have the green house on the left, yellow house on the right, and that's who I delivered the papers to. And when I ran out of my route and I still had papers left every day, I would go to the trailer park, which had started just after the war, and hawk the bulletin. Hey, get your bulletin, get your bulletin. And I would sell out the rest of my route. And then I made 1 cent and 2/3 of paper. So for 6 days that was a dime. And I think I may have gotten a nickel for Sundays. I'm not sure what you got for a Sunday paper.
And
Dailies were
what
5
did you do with
cents,
your winnings?
I'm sorry?
What did you do with your winnings?
Well, there were 2 places I spent my money. Just up the street was the Carruthers Cottage, which I called, somehow I remember Lucy's and I remember Harvey's. But whatever, it was the same building, and just inside that catty corner door on the ground floor was a pinball machine. And so some of my savings went into that pinball machine. I used to go up and have buy a root beer float from Gog's up at the post office building up at the wood camps. And then I decided that I wanted to have a raft to ride the waves. And so I remember saving for a long time to get $8 together. That's what it cost to buy a raft. And I used the raft for a while, and then I decided the raft was getting more fun than I was, and I would rather go back to just body surfing and not use the raft so much.
How did the town change in those days in the summertime? You were isolated pretty much in the winter, but...
Well, in the summer, of course, the town filled up, or people who owned houses. There were more seasonal people then, I think. I'm not sure about that. But
so you didn't have the same friends coming back at each summer?
Yeah, we did have the same.
Did.
That's what I mean. They weren't just daily or week. I mean, not just weekly. Mostly people would come down and stay. A lot of times the kids and the mother would stay down, and the father would go back up to work. There were a couple of lifeguard beaches. I recall that the lifeguards gave swimming lessons over on the bay at the point several days a week at 9 o'clock, and then they would go on duty at 10.
And do you remember, we've been hearing from people that there were huge dunes up at the point, that Sarah Boardman's daughter said she couldn't find her mother sometimes because the dunes went up and down, and Sarah was in one of them.
Where their house is now, if you went at the end of Commonwealth, there was a huge dune and then slightly smaller dunes on each side. And Brownie Boy and I went back in there and built forts, and nobody told us in those days to stay off the dunes. But there were, there were lots of smaller dunes, but there were 3 big dunes. I mean, I was a kid, yeah. So I'm sure they seemed larger, but they were quite big dunes, and not just high in one place, but they went out a ways toward the point. Yeah.
And you were saying that one of the times that you came back, you were looking at a house or a building that you had been in. I guess it had been your place at one point, and your sister had a...
Oh, when the house, in the video that I recorded at the talk that I gave, I talked about the Stackhouse property that was at the end of Sherman and moved up on the Commonwealth. And we lived there for several years until my mother died. And we had a playroom up on the 3rd floor, sort of in the attic. We came, when the house was for sale, it's probably been, I don't know, 12 years ago, 15. Kate and I and Jessica went through the house, and we went up on the 2nd floor and looked at our bedrooms where they had been and everything, and then there was a door to the attic. We went up there, and Kate said, "Oh, I've been dreaming about this room for years and years." It turns out that was our playroom on the 3rd floor, and for some reason she didn't know what she was dreaming about. She had been dreaming about it, and it was just like she remembered it, and then after she saw it, she never dreamed that dream again. So yeah. Speaking of dreams, I don't know whether I remember a train coming through Strathmere or not. The last train to run through Strathmere was late in 1942, And I have a memory of a big train going by my grandfather's house while I was in the bedroom overlooking Commonwealth. And to this day, I don't know if that's a dream or if I would have been 3, about just turned 3 when the last train went through, steam engine. I don't know whether I dreamed it or whether I actually remember that train going through.
Now, someone has told us that her father and her husband used to take the train from Ocean City, I guess, in the 21st Street station. That would have been 1947, 48, 50. So it didn't come into town at that point, so they had to get over to Ocean City, get on the train, and then go to Philadelphia from there.
Right.
Around 24th
My grandfather was still working for the railroad after the war, and they had taken up the tracks in 43. So they had a train bus, and the public service ran a bus that coordinated with the train schedule of 51st Street. And so you could get a train from Sea Isle and Strathmere and over to the 51st Street train station. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And in your video, you mentioned a couple of good places to sled in town, but I didn't hear many details. How'd that work?
Well, there weren't many details. I mean,
how
it didn't
often did you
snow
have
much.
snow?
One house was the one just north of the church, I guess, that had been a post office during the 30s. And then another place was the bridge approach, was a slope, so you could sled there.
On a regular sled, or did you do cardboard?
Oh no, we had a sled, a flexible flyer.
Flexible flyer, of course.
Yeah, a steering sled. Yeah, I had the wagon. I got the bike. Trying to think what else for those days. I spent time. I finally was able to spend time in Ocean City after school, and my dad worked in Atlantic City, and I would stay with one of my friends in my grade. And he would come through from work and pick me up then around 5 o'clock.
And your family moved and sold their properties after the...
Well, we had the 44 hurricane, did a lot of damage. My aunt's house was on Whittier and was quite badly damaged and was moved up to the highway. And then my mother died in April or May of 48. And my grandfather died. He worked for the railroad as an auditor. He died on the train coming out of Buffalo that fall. And he was 67 or 68, so he was still working. And then we had a big northeaster in November 25th, I think, of 1950. And the streets were flooded, and the kids threw things, bottles with messages out into the ocean going by on Sherman Road. But the heat went out in the house, and my aunt tried to get my grandmother, who was quite sick, to come downstairs where it was heated, and it was too much effort, and she died. And the storm was so bad that the sand dunes covered the roads both to Sea Isle and Ocean City, such that they couldn't get her body out of the house for 3 days. And it was such a traumatic thing to have 3 deaths and 2 storms that the McCullough family basically sold out. And 51, we all left. We moved over to Ocean City. My dad had remarried, and we moved over to Ocean City. And Aunt Jean went up to Runnymede. Aunt Del went over to Cape May Courthouse, a farm they bought, a little farm on Route 9.
So then you came back as vacationers.
We started coming back, yeah, I get confused, the late 70s, I guess. Yeah, when the kids were... Yeah, we started coming back to the Bayview Motel, and they had what I called the monastic cells that had one window with an air conditioner in it, so it was pretty dark. And but it was at the shore, and the nice thing was it was on the bay. You could swim in the bay, or my brother-in-law had a boat we put in, and we could get to the beach quite quickly. So we did that for several years. And then when I remarried and Jessica got pregnant with Stephanie, her dad said, "You really ought to stay on the beachfront." Well, I said, "I can't afford the beachfront." He said, "I'll go half." So we did that, and we rented at the end of Sumner. We stayed there for a couple of years, and then for a lot of years we rented at 11 Webster, a very nice house on the north side of Webster. And then we saw that the house on the bay, we always looked at houses, but we didn't think we could afford them. We looked at the old Andrus house on the bay, 212 Bayview, when it came up for sale. And my family said, that's not a good place to buy. The tide comes in under the house twice a day. The lot's not good. The bulkhead's awful. The house is almost 90-some years old. But the view was great. So I told Jessica if we bought it, we would have it raised. So we did that. And this is all in the video. I hate to repeat all that. But we ended up buying 212 Bayview and got flooded, had it raised, burnt down, rebuilt, and had a really good run here in town. I did want to say about the time we had here in town. In part 2 of this video, I talked about the SFEC and the SIA, and we left our mark a couple of other ways. I was on the Fire Commission for several years, and I was chairman for a couple of years then, and they mandated that commissions had to have a website. So I was pretty proud of the fact that we built a website that became sort of a model for other fire commissions, and that worked out pretty well. I also, soon after we came down here, bought the house, I came up with this idea of a Strathmere, keep it secret. In Pennsylvania, you don't have a license plate in the front, so I got a license plate, something like that. And then I wanted to get a magnet. My son Dan was in the Honors College at Penn State, and they sent us a magnet that was just the right size. So I called them and asked where they got it, and I had magnets made. I distributed it several ways in town. Is that the end? And then Steph at the old shack started to sell it. So she sold quite a bit. And if you want one, you can still get one at the old shack. I also wanted to say that we did chair the 4th of July parade for 5 years. And I say we, I was nominally in charge. Jessica didn't want to be in charge of anything. She said she was willing to help. So I was the front man and she did all the work. She organized it. She got all the registration people, the judges. She really did everything for the 4th of July parade. And Jessica also worked at volunteered at the library, then worked at the library. She organized mahjong games for quite a while. She organized book club meetings for quite a while. So we ended up being more involved than we wanted to be in the life of Strathmere. And now that we've moved to North Carolina, it's almost a relief to just be ourselves down there.
And when you come back here for visits?
Well, we realize how much we miss the people. We see lots of people. We brought the dogs, Banner and Champ, this year. And we always said that nobody would recognize us. They recognized the dogs. And so when we walk the dogs now, people do see us and come up, and we get a lot of chance to see our old friends from Strathmere.
That's great. So one of the other things that two other things that people have talked about is that when you come over the bridge or you come up Landis into Strathmere Commonwealth, that there's just this feeling that comes over you. Do you experience that when you've been out on the mainland or up out of the area?
Oh, I like Strathmere. I have to tell you, coming over the Sea Isle Bridge and seeing the ocean, that's really our first taste. We usually come over the ferry and come up that way. And so just seeing the ocean from the top of I call it the new Sea Isle Bridge that was built after the '62 storm. But then it's good to get out of Sea Isle and really on a weekend when we check in out of Whale Beach and get up into Strathmere. Jessica likes the off season. Pardon me. I like summer with the crowds, and winter was okay. If you're a kid, it's not so good if you don't have access to a car. When we were kids, the cars were used to get people to work, not to run people around, to ball games and stuff. So that was tough. Living in Strathmere with a car is wonderful because you don't get the crowds, but you have easy access to Sea Isle and Ocean City. So
we're also starting to hear septic stories. Do you have any great septic?
Our septic stories are not great. They are bad. We.
Are they fit for retelling?
I'm recording this as tomorrow we're expecting. I want to say Hermione, but I think it's Hermine or something is going to spread some water anyway up here. Last night was a new moon, and we're going to have a new moon and high tides and northeast wind, and that means there'll be water in the street. We lived on Bayview, so our septic we had a field, but the septic tank was under the driveway, which went underwater when we had moderate, sometimes with minor tidal flooding. With moderate, we definitely went under, and that meant you couldn't flush the toilet until the tide went out, and you couldn't walk the dogs because we couldn't get the dogs through the water. They didn't want to go through the water to go to the bathroom, so we had to time dog walking to low tide. If you have a northeaster and it's pushing the water into the bay and it hangs around for a while, then the water can't get out and the next tide gets higher, and then if you have 3, it really gets high. 1962, of course, there were 5 tides, and that's what did all the damage. I'm hoping this won't be this bad. This won't be that bad. Yeah.
Now, you wanted to save 5 minutes at the end to talk about something?
That I already did.
Oh, you did.
That
You
was
included
our
that.
time here, our involvements and things.
Oh, okay, great. And you had told me a story one time about Brownie's father taking you to a football game against Pennsville. And
the first game, the first high school, Ocean City High School game that I went to. I was in 2nd grade, and memories can be funny when from 2nd grade times, but I clearly remember, I think this actually happened. Ocean City traditionally plays Pleasantville on the last game of the season on Thanksgiving, and so we went over to that, and that was my first taste of organized football. There was no television then, of course. I listened to the radio for my programs at night, but there was no television, so the entertainment you got was watching high school football or sports. So Mr. Brown took us to a lot of games, and this particular game was my first one. And I don't know who won the game. Ocean City and Peeville were quite competitive, but at the end of the game, a fight broke out. It was away. It was at Pleasantville. They had kept the fire engine in the end zone or behind the end zone. They brought the fire engine out, and they sprayed this crowd of fighters. And being a 2nd grader, seeing this display, I thought this was the best thing in the world. I thought, where have I been? So I became hooked on high school football.
You're a fan now.
Everything after that was a letdown because they never brought the fire truck on
You
to
call
spray
that a football game?
spray the crowd. But for the next 3rd grade through 6th grade, he took me to every Ocean City home and away game, except Point Pleasant. I remember I didn't know where Point Pleasant was, but he said it was too far. And of course there was no Garden State Parkway in those days, so it would have been up Route 9, a long drive up Route 9, so we didn't do that one.
Now, was Mr. Brown the Coast Guard person?
He was a chief. He was retired, so I didn't even know
okay.
that. But yeah, he was a chief. Merritt Othello Brown, good guy. Later when he was, I don't remember this, but he assumed the role of constable in town. And so he enforced things like beach parties, making sure that people cleaned up after beach parties, and he was our local.
You had to do a $5 deposit, according to Sarah Boardman, and you could get it back if you passed cleanup inspection. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. He enforced things. She came, or her dad came in '51, the same year that we left.
Yeah.
So but '51, Debbie Vandergrift, Whitcamp Vandergrift was born. Mm-hmm. Eddie Andrus was born.
Yeah.
51 was the eventful year. We left.
But now you kept in touch, aren't you? An honorary Ocean City High School
right.
grad?
I went to Ocean City High School for 8 years. Ocean City grade schools, let's say, for 8 years, and then we had family issues, and we moved up to Camden County in '53 in my 8th grade year. So I never got to Ocean City High School, where I watched all those football games. My mother and her siblings had gone there. I knew all the fight songs and everything. So I was upset that I wasn't going to get to go to Ocean City High School. So I found people when we moved back down here, or even before that, and went to a few of their 5-year reunions. And so I'm an honorary member of the Ocean City High School class of '57, in addition to Audubon High School class of '57. And I go to pretty much all the reunions from both schools. So yeah, that's good. And we saw several people this summer from my Ocean City grade school days. Yeah.
Do your kids share your passion for coming down here? Of course, now, how do your kids feel about it?
Oh, my kids love it. The grandchildren left, two of the three left this morning. Holly and Lori left this morning. Yeah, Dan, my son Dan is a teacher at Ocean City High School. He teaches physics and astronomy, and he loves the shore. So yeah, yeah, it gets in your blood, maybe in your genes, and you pass it down, you know. But the grandchildren have always come. Sometimes it's just for a couple days, as it was this year. Sometimes it's for a week or more. But they love Strathmere, and when they arrive with a bucket list. They know of everything they want to do in Strathmere, in Seattle, Ocean City, whatever. So yeah, they love it.
Pretty cool.
I think
Okay.
I think I'm about talked out.
All right. Well, thank you. And again, a lot of what you're expanding on is available on your video.
Right. The video has well, the video is really about early Strathmere
Right.
history. So it goes up to the '62 storm, and then it talks about the big fire afterward.
Right.
But there's no current stuff. Yeah.
Okay. So what was it like living here year round? You had to be outside every day with your dogs.
Right. Well, we did not live here year-round at first. Once my son graduated from high school, we sold the house in Westchester, and Jessica had the house that she and her father had bought and halfway built, finished, up in the Poconos. So we would spend the winters in the Poconos, and then the summers here for 6 months. So Easter to Thanksgiving was here. And then after I retired, it got hard to pay for 2 houses. So we debated which one to sell, and Jessica made the decision to sell the house in the Poconos, and we started to live here year-round. And I honestly don't remember exactly when that was. That was probably around 2008. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, we always had 2 dogs, and so we were used to being out. Jessica insisted when I stopped going to work. I kept working but telecommuting for a number of years. And I could actually do that as we were going back and forth between here and the Poconos. She insisted that the way to health in old age is to walk. And so we would walk the dogs just about a mile. We would figure out where a mile was and do that 3 times a day. Plus they had to go out early and late besides that, so 5 times. And we would walk in the Poconos, and we would go in the Poconos sometimes 30 days without the temperature going above freezing. It wasn't like Buffalo, but it was pretty cold. And so I got used to that. And then when we came down to the shore, as everybody says, it's a different kind of cold. As you know, it's damp. And I didn't notice it as much as Jessica did. The first year, and the wind.
Oh, there's the wind.
There's a wind, and we were on pilings on the bay, and there's nothing to block a northwest wind or a northeast wind even. Houses on pilings are built to sway, and the house would sway when we had a wind. When we've been here in the summer, you never noticed that, but in the winter, you noticed that. And I don't know if because you had windows open, if the wind went right through or what, but we never noticed it until the first winter was tough and harder on Jessica than on me. She really did not like the dampness. By the second winter, it wasn't so bad, and then after that, and she also met a lot of people, Gina and Kathy, and the book club she started to make friends. I was still working, I think, telecommuting, and so she got to where she liked Strathmere as much or more than I did. But the wind and the dampness, but it does grow on you to where it's not as bad as it was the first. You just went through a first year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty
well,
mild.
the second
Though.
was it mild?
Yeah.
Yeah. The second. Well, of course, all the winters now seem to be getting milder.
Better.
Now
So
we
you
did have the
interacted-
bay freeze a couple times, but never so you could walk on it.
It would freeze though.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
right where our docks are and out maybe 5 feet past the end of the dock, it would freeze solid enough that nothing moved. But 1 or 2 tides and that would break up.
You were involved in lots of different things in town. Weren't you in the fishing club and
Well, yeah, I don't fish, but the fishing club seemed to be the best social group in town. Winter and summer socials and lots of parties after the tournaments. And so I joined, it's a fishing and environmental club. And we were pretty much, interested in the environment. So I liked that idea. And we did a lot of beach cleanups and the osprey nest building and all that. But early on, I guess I had stopped working, and I did not think that their website was kept up to date as well as it could be. And I had never done a website. I said to Randy, who was the president at the time, Randy Roche, would you like me to take a shot at the website? He said, yeah. I said, okay. I may have to take a class to know how to do this. Well, it turns out, if the website is already up and running, posting to it is really, you don't need a class, you just sort of learn. And so that's what I did. And I spent a lot of time with that website. And then I was a block captain for the citizens group. And then I volunteered to be on the board, and there wasn't an opening then. And I think like a couple weeks later they were having an SIA meeting, and Butch and Debbie and Donna were the 3 officers, and they said they would like a vice president. And I said, doesn't sound like a very hard job, vice president. I'll do that. And so I became vice president of the SIA. Butch, I think, wanted out, and I didn't want in. I liked being a staff guy. So the next year, they always sent out postcards to announce that the SIA was starting another year. And I said, why don't we send out an email? We'll get as many emails as we can. And we'll still send out the postcard, but we'll see how this works. And so I sent out, I had never done an email with a picture in it. And I figured out how to insert a picture that was like the letterhead for the SIA. That's my idea of a letterhead. And I had a picture of the beach. And Butch said, that was really neat, but I couldn't see any bikinis in this picture. And so the next letterhead had a picture with some bikinis from a distance, very tasteful.
and were you in the
And that got me started on writing newsletters where I would insert pictures into the newsletter. And then that became almost a craze, as you know.
full-time job?
Yeah, it was, in the summertime I sometimes was doing 2 a week. And, yeah. And I would try to make a point of, it was not an SIA newsletter, it was sponsored by the SIA, but it was a Strathmere newsletter. So whatever was going on with the fishing club, with the citizens, with the SIA, with the fire commission, with, who am I missing? Some of the library.
The church?
I would tell
everything?
people, the church, I would tell people both what was coming up, and I would take pictures of it, and then what had happened, I would put in the newsletter of the lifeguards too, the beach patrol. I would have their kayak races and their bay races and all that. So
And
that became, I became near mad, crazy, doing all that. So we finally moved to North Carolina because of the
Because of
newsletter.
the newsletter. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
So then, of course, there was the centennial year with the trolley tour, the legendary trolley tours. 2012.
Yeah, and I knew that my grandparents had been the first postmasters at the time of the change in the name. And in January of 2012, I started to do some research, and I found a book on Cape May history that gave the date of the post offices in the county. And it listed my grandfather's name as having been appointed, like, and I forget the date, but it was like January 12th or 15th of 1912. And I thought, oh, darn, I've missed it. It's already 2 weeks later, and the centennial has already happened. So I did some more research with Carol Baker's website and other places on the name change. And I wrote a newsletter about how there had been a contest to name it and how it had happened and some of the things I talked about in the video. And once I put that out, then I said, we really should make this a bicentennial, I keep saying that, a centennial celebration in Strathmere. And so the 4th of July, a lot of people did that. We did, the SIA did the trolley tours. I did with Debbie, and Elaine did with the kids. And it was more popular than we expected, and we couldn't, everybody that wanted to go couldn't go, and they wanted to go the next year or the next, yeah, first it got rained out. Remember that? We had the we had the trolley all scheduled.
The
and
water
it
was
actually
coming up
here,
inside the trolley.
and the water was 2 or 3 feet deep, and
When he
even
opened
in
that door.
Commonwealth, and always on Bayview. And so we said, okay, we're not doing this. And so it was a week later, maybe, or 2 weeks later.
Couple, yeah.
We did them, and they were fun. I had fun. Oh, I had unfortunately scraped my leg. I have AFib, and so I'm on a blood thinner. I had just started on a blood thinner that year, and I scraped my leg trying to avoid stepping on the dog under the dining room table at home, and it started to blow up as the trolley tours were about to go, and so I had to do all 3 trolley tours. I forget what I had. I had some kind of
you wrapped it or something.
I wrapped it or something. It was not pretty. So I had to stand on one leg, and yeah, I had a cheat sheet. So I had I was the play-by-play, and Debbie was the color commentator, and so she could do everything from memory. I had to remember. I knew a lot, but I wanted to get the dates right, and then it started to get dark, and so I had to wing it anyway, driving around in the trolley, and it was very. I don't know if it was Labor Day weekend. It was very crowded as usual on a weekend, and so the trolley had trouble even. I say, stop here. I want to make a point, and there was nowhere to stop, and people would back up behind the trolley. So yeah, but that was fun, and that experience, and then my cousin Pete, who had grown up in Strathmere, died a year or 2 later. And I made up a talk for his memorial service of his boyhood days in Strathmere. And so I started with his grandparents, who were my grandparents, and that got me to put together a Adobe, what do you call it, PowerPoint show of that. And that was, 10 or 12 minutes, but that sort of got me thinking about history in Strathmere. Carol's website is amazing. I talked in the video about how Aunt Jean read the Catherine Carmona's write-up of Strathmere and how it was awful. No history of Strathmere is complete without discussing the contributions of the McCullough family. And so I said, Aunt Jean, you have to tell me more about this, and better than that, write it down. So she did. She wrote it all out, longhand about why the McCulloughs had contributed so much to the early days of Strathmere. And I took it over to Carol, and Carol published it on the website. I typed it up, and it's there today. You can read about it. But it got me thinking about what really happened and what gets written down in different places. And I spent a lot of time going through Carol's Strathmere.net website and learning and cross-referencing or checking that with some of my own family stories and histories and trying to figure out, okay, what's real and what's Memorex here. And then Mike Hudart, who was the president of the Historical Preservation Society of Upper Township, asked Carol to give a talk over there based on her website. And Carol was uncomfortable in front of a crowd. She said maybe Ken Weaver would do it. And so I said, maybe I will. I'm just enough of a ham that I wanted to do it, but I knew it was going to be quite a bit of work. And so I thought that since it was to be based on the website, I could use a lot of Carol's pictures that are on the website. Unfortunately, she has not stored them in a single, she's had done it over time. The pictures are in different PCs and different folders, and I gave her about 50 pictures I wanted to use, and she said, I can't do this. Well, luckily for me, Ralph Forbes has a huge number of Strathmere pictures.
Really?
Most of the pictures in my talk came from Ralph. I got a few from the website, from Carol. Loretta had the Penunto pictures. John and Rolene Kern used to live on Vincent and now have a house up on Seaview next to Gary and Denise Riordan. And for years he has collected postcards of Strathmere that go way back. And I used a number of those. And then we had pictures from the family albums, some of which I had used in the Pete's Memorial Service. And so I put that together for the talk in wherever that is, Petersburg, I guess, at the library in Upper Township. And Mike kept saying, now Ken, we only have 45 minutes because there's a business meeting and we have to do this and that and talk about the next meeting and all that. And I had gotten started and I thought, oh, I'm in trouble here. This is going to go forever. So I cut it back and I did it in 45 minutes. And afterward he said, oh, that was one of the best talks we ever had. You should video it. You should record it, make a video of it. And some people had asked me if they should come over to the talk in Upper. And I said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it next year. And of course I didn't know the house was going to sell and we'd be gone.
Right.
But I said, yeah, I will put together a talk and give it in Strathmere.
So that was last summer.
So that was 2015. We had moved in the 1st of May in 2015. And I had this talk that was now, well, from the previous October. And I started to put more pictures together. And I thought, you know, Mike said I should video it. I would like to do that. So I looked into it on the internet. I rented a sort of high-class video camera that would have a remote mic. That was what I was really worried about, was to get the sound. Because I knew that what I wanted to do was not have me so much in the video as the pictures themselves. They're really the story. But I wanted the audio that I was talking about, giving. And so that's what I did. And my son Dan pointed it. And the first night, Wednesday night, he actually tried to follow me, and when the SIA board was up there, he recorded the SIA board and you giving the introductions. And then he didn't want to sit through it again the next night. I said, if you will just, because he had some other commitment, and I said, if you'll just get it started, I think I'll be fine, because I have to stay on one side of the screen. So Elaine did the introductions. He got her, and then, but of course the mic was on me, so the audio was only as good as
Right.
you were close to me. And then Wednesday I was a little bit nervous. I didn't take a camera. I didn't think to take a camera over, still camera, and I gave the talk. You saw the Wednesday version.
Both nights were standing room only.
Both nights we had a couple seats in the front. I kept saying, "Come on down, sit down," and they didn't want to do that. I kidded them that they wanted to be close to the wine. So, and then I had questions and answers in the first session Wednesday night, and that allowed me to think about a couple other things I could build into the talk. So on Friday I cut out one slide just to try to save a little time, but then I went into the fishing stuff that Joey Callahan had told me about, and I spent more time, I think, on our fire. I don't know, but it went a long time. And so in the video, I don't have the questions and answers. I don't have the introductions, and it still is an hour and a half plus long.
Well, people are motivated to watch it and to hear it, though.
Well, the other thing is, if you're not sitting there fidgeting, you can get up, you can stop, get up, go to the bathroom, have a beer. I call it a 3-beer video. Yeah, it'll take you a while. I just saw some friends yesterday. I was out at Commonwealth by the Blinker, and I saw good friends of mine, a gal had gone to grade school with me. And I didn't see her, but it's Henny and Joan Weigel live over in Arkansas, and we used to go to their house for a night in Venice all the time. And I didn't know if I'd be able to see them when we're down here for only 2 weeks. And here they had just had lunch in the Deauville, and they were coming out, and I said, hey. So I got a chance to see the both of them. And they said they had seen about half the video, and they were going to finish it, but he said, boy, that's long. I said, oh yeah, I went on and on. But the video, I think, will be interesting to people who know Strathmere. If you don't know Strathmere, it's gobbledygook. It doesn't make any sense, because so many of the things that I talk about are still here. You still see where the old pilings where the railroad was for the Reading, and the Deauville's the oldest building in town, or at least some piece of wood in it is.
And everything, not a lot of things aren't where they used to be. Things have been
The West Jersey cottage, of course, is on at the Blinker, and a lot of how the Stackhouse house or property was moved up to the highway. I didn't talk about my Aunt Dell's house that was at the end of Whittier, but that was damaged. There's a house called the Quinn House there now. She was just to the east of that. They were where my cousin Pete grew up. And after that was damaged in the '44 hurricane, and so they moved that up on the highway, and that's where Bruce and Gary Riordan were raised, in that same house where Pete was raised on the beach. They were raised on the highway, and then now it's the place where Marion lives.
So I know you and Jessica are happy in North Carolina.
Yeah.
But what do you miss the most about Strathmere?
Well, the politically correct answer would be the people, which is also correct. I think that's really what we miss. I miss the beach. We are 8 minutes from the beach, and so that's not a detriment, but the sand isn't quite as nice, and it's like a Long Beach Island beach where it comes in and slopes. So I love to body surf. This week and last week I have been out there body surfing when the waves were good. It was choppy a couple days, but I really like to ride the waves. I don't have a surfer. I never used a surfboard. I just body surf. And I have not done that down there. So we go to the pools a little bit. But we do miss. We've seen a lot of people here that we know, and if you own 2 dogs that have to be walked 3 times a day, you meet a lot of people that you used to know.
Yeah, your mile-long walk takes a lot longer.
Our 20-minute walk takes 40 or 50 minutes, yeah, and that's okay.
Nice to be loved.
Yeah, it's nice.